Welcome to Safety Spectrum, your environmental health and safety connection. This program is a presentation of the Michigan Safety Conference. For almost a century, the annual conference has provided credible educational opportunities and valuable support to the safety and health practitioner by offering 120 instructional programs along with exhibits highlighting the latest in safety equipment, instrumentation, and demonstrations. To learn more about the conference, please find us at safetyconference.org. Welcome to Safety Spectrum. I'm your host, Sheila Ide. This program is sponsored by the Michigan Safety Conference, and our topic today is artificial intelligence and safety. Where does the safety professional's responsibility begin and end when using AI? With all the buzz about the increasing role of artificial intelligence in assisting decision-making, researching, reporting, and writing, how can the safety professional make the best use of this intuitive technology? Our guest is Heather Chapman of Paradigm Safety. Heather is a certified safety professional, certified hazardous materials manager, and certified ergonomics assessment specialist. She has 25 years experience and has partnered with numerous organizations to conduct gap analyses and design plans to implement sustainable safety systems. She uses practical problem solving with unique approaches to help get safety cultures back on track or energized to the next level. Heather helps organizations think beyond compliance and inspires a holistic approach to safety programs. Heather is an active member of the AIHA Ergonomics Committee and is working on a subcommittee to develop the principles of good practice for ergonomics. Heather also serves on the ASSP AI Task Force Subcommittee. Thank you for joining me today on Safety Spectrum, Heather.
Thanks for connecting, Sheila. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I see you're pretty busy outside too, outside of your job. You're with the AIHA and also with the ASSP. So good to know.
Yeah,
We're-
I like to stay active, and I think one of my superpowers is relationship building. So I like to be connected with people and kind of always that learning mindset, right? So I'm
Absolutely.
connected here and try to learn as much as I can.
Okay, could you take a moment to just describe your company and the specialties or philosophy that you have?
Yeah. The name of my business itself kind of gives a nod to the work that I do. Paradigm. So paradigm shifts. I work to, really help drive cultural change in organizations. And like I just said, I embrace a learning mindset, and I like to work with organizations that kind of have that same philosophy. You're always open to learning something new and don't consider it detrimental when there's a mistake. The mistakes are opportunities to learn. We fail small and smart, and then we learn and we adapt and move on. Much of the work I do really begins with coaching of that right mindset. And then, you know, when I work with organizations, a lot of the things that I do are around risk assessments, that cultural piece. I do a lot with ergonomics, and frankly, that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. When people feel safe and secure and they're not sore at the end of the day, they tend to be a bit happier. Um,
One would think.
yeah, right. And then, just program building. So a lot of companies I work with are at ground zero, and they're looking to figure out where do we go and how do we get there. So, one of the strategies I use is human-centered design, and I think it's really unique to the way that I work and how I get things accomplished.
Sounds good. I remember I've been in safety for many, many years, and I remember the old days were just putting a ream of paper under a keyboard was our ergonomic program,
Right.
Ad-
Yeah.
Adjustable chairs, that was about it. So
Oh, yeah,
glad,
we've come a long way.
yeah. So first, in general, let's lay the groundwork. Can you give an overview of artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Let's just keep it simple and say that the intent of artificial intelligence is to perform the way that humans think. So anybody can Google what is the definition of AI, but let's just keep it simple that its intent is to function in the way that we think. And when we look at AI in the past few years, and even just in this last year, it advances all of the time. And it moves way faster than businesses and people can even keep up with. You could research something today on AI, and I guarantee in a month from now, it's going to be different. So if you think about the introduction of ChatGPT a few years back, when you asked a question, it would immediately give you a response. And sometimes that answer wasn't really, what you needed or what you were trying to get from your query. Um, in comes in the past year-ish something called reasoning models. And so now this is how I say, we're trying to mimic human thinking. This is what a reasoning model does. It starts to figure out, well, why are you asking that? What are you trying to get to? So that as it's thinking, it's trying to better predict where you're going with your line of questioning. So now when you ask that type of question, rather than getting an immediate response, the AI is going to be thinking about and understanding, what are you asking? What type of answer are you looking for? And sometimes that may mean that the AI is going to ask you like a clarifying question. It might need some additional context before it gives you a response. So again, going back to, it's starting to think more like and work more like humans think.
Huh.
And I mentioned Chat GPT, but like AI is so much more than that. Um, it's things like machine learning. So I want people to be comfortable with AI terms because I feel like when something's new, we all have like a little bit of fear around, what is this? How do I use it? I want to speak about it, but I don't want to sound like I'm completely inept. So we got to be comfortable with certain things. Machine learning, it's simply a system that learns patterns from data. Okay, simple. Natural language processing. It's a system that understands human language. Okay, ChatGPT is an example of that. You don't have to write in code, you don't have to speak in a certain language, you just type as you would talking to a person. LLMs, or large language models, those are systems that are trained on huge amounts of text to generate language. So if we think about it in the context of, everyday life, or particularly in safety world, we see all those things that play when we use computer vision. If we use augmented or virtual reality for safety training. Um, I mentioned I love ergonomics. One of the AI tools I use is video analysis for like automating ergonomic assessments. And then, of course, there are platforms out there where you can automate certain safety inspections. So the concept of AI, like if we want to dive deep, it's very complex. But at the surface level, we just need to understand that its intent is to think the way that we would perform a certain task, and it's trying to mimic that.
I was just reading an article where it was developing a medical program from AI where it would actually talk like in a conversation, where it would ask you questions rather than just sending you to
Absolutely.
different places to look up symptoms or what have you. It would actually create a conversation without emotion. I mean, yes, we have conversations in meetings trying to reach a conclusion on an issue or a problem, but we don't often sit back without emotion and just get to the root cause
Right.
of something. So I guess that would be an advantage or disadvantage depending on
Well,
where
yes,
you're coming
depending on, yeah, depending on the context, right?
Exactly. So, how does artificial intelligence interact with safety professionals?
Well, you almost just gave a segue when you were talking about the medical aspect. So one of the ways that it interacts with safety is in the past, year and a half or so, there's been just kind of an advent of something called an agent. And in the world of AI, and particularly in safety, this would be an agent that has been trained and equipped to basically be a safety superhero. And I kind of likened it, even at the Michigan Safety Conference, when I was speaking about a vertical agent or an AI agent, I used the example of a bowling alley. So if you think about a bowling alley and you put those little gutter bumpers in and you throw your ball down the alley, the ball could go and ping pong back and forth, but it can't actually go outside of those barriers, right? So with a vertical agent, it is deeply trained in a specific task or subject, and it can essentially function as a professional, say a safety professional with like 20 years of experience, because its knowledge base is very, very deep and it can't go outside of those knowledge boundaries. So, example, we could go to Gemini 2.5 or ChatGPT and we could ask a question on requirements for fall protection. And we'll get a lot of information, and you can check the sources. So there's always a button at the bottom of your query for sources. And I always tell people you better check that because you need to know where it's pulling information from. But sometimes it's pulling content from places that's not actually regulatory text. Well, in a safety vertical agent, it would have been trained on, let's say, only regulation. So it could be EPA, it could be OSHA, it could be your state regulations. It cannot go, your vertical safety agent cannot go outside the bounds of those regulations. So when it gives you answers, you know that it's citing a regulation. So
Okay.
there's there's that type of agent within the safety world. Um, when we, think about natural language processing, you could interact with an EHS AI software and ask it things like, explain the new silica rule in plain English. And it's going to summarize the regulation for you and simplify it and basically highlight some of the key points and factors that you would need to consider.
And as you know, it's coming from a source that you're trusting, you know you're getting the straight poop, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then, many of us, maybe we don't even necessarily realize it, but you can drop incident data into a Gemini or a Chat GPT, and let's just say it's like I've done this with an Excel file with about 10,000 rows of incident data, and you can drop it in there and it's going to analyze all of that information for you within seconds. So again, this is like machine learning at work. The more data we get it, the better it's going to get at identifying patterns and predicting trends and essentially telling you within seconds, where should you be focusing time, effort, energy, money to resolve issues? So, you know, many companies are starting to invest in like computer vision technology. So CCTV for real-time hazard detection, PPE compliance, proximity sensors for like fork truck pedestrian interactions to identify hotspots so we can kind of eliminate the potential for people to be struck by fork trucks. Um, Predictive analytics, like we were just talking about with the Gemini or the Chat GPT. But essentially, when we use predictive analytics, what we're trying to do is give our system all sorts of what we call unstructured data. So again, this is one of those terms people just need to be comfortable with. It doesn't mean anything fancy. It simply means it doesn't have to be in a particular format. I could give an AI system Excel sheets, PDF files, Word documents, PowerPoints, whatever. I could literally drop all of that into my AI system and it's going to assess all of that. It doesn't matter the content or the structure that it's in. It will look at all of it. And from all of it, it's going to give you insights.
Well,
So
I can see that as a strength. You're taking disparate
absolutely,
information and trying to determine patterns so that you can
absolutely.
make a prediction, essentially.
Yeah.
Where does intuition fit into this? You come up against a wall and certain human intuition you can't program in.
Oh, for sure. I always say in every talk I do about AI does not replace HI, which is human ingenuity. We could say intuition as well, but we still have kind of our own gut feel about certain things. And because AI acts in a way that's non-emotional and cannot have that particular human characteristic, it's our responsibility when we're using AI to still apply that. We can't let AI function in a vacuum on its own.
Makes sense. Like, say, trying to figure out patterns is often difficult with information coming from different sources. So that really would speed up the process. Absolutely, would make sense too. So
Yeah,
what are some of the issues organizations should consider before adopting an AI solution?
it is, using AI really should be treated like any other major project or initiative. There should be a thought process that goes along the what's, the hows, and the whys. So I always tell people, define the problem that you're hoping AI is going to solve for you. What is the problem? And if you don't know that and you're just trying to use AI because you know it might save you some time, um, you're going to run into issues. You need to know the whys. And particularly, we have so many concerns around data security and privacy. Your IT and leadership teams, they're going to want to know, why do you want to use this? How is it going to help you? Like, what is the value of using this? And part of that comes from first understanding the problem you're trying to solve. So there's that. I always say, one of the best places to start with AI is knowing where you have an inefficient process or repetitive work, because AI lives and breathes on speeding up those processes. it loves data. So the more data you can feed it and those things that are repetitive in nature, AI thrives on that. So figure that out because that is like a slam dunk in streamlining your workflow. Um, Identify data silos. So you just mentioned disparate data. Absolutely. We have data stored everywhere in different learning management systems, maybe in an HR system, maybe in a safety platform, Google Drives. We have files everywhere. So one of the things you need to do is identify where everything is stored, and then how can your AI system integrate with your existing systems? Because that's kind of a big deal. You don't want to spend your time pulling data from all of these different sources and then dropping it into another, software. So can your AI be connected to and speak to all of your other existing systems? And then you want clean data. So don't feed it information that you know is inaccurate. Make sure what you're giving it is correct in the first place so that
That's
it's
a little hard to understand. Why would you be giving it inaccurate data?
well, if you're storing old information, or let's just say it's an incomplete record, right? Like you started an incident investigation and it never got finished, or it was started electronically and then it got printed out and the rest of it was handwritten. If you don't have that electronic copy, you now have a hard copy somewhere and you have an inaccurate record stored electronically.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
now you're not giving your AI system the full picture of, maybe what that investigation was.
Gotcha.
So, just the other piece is, the communication side of things. Um, Everybody wants to know, why are you using this? And particularly with employees, um, if you're going to be video recording, A, consent, you need to get their consent to record them. B, they need to understand, where's this information going and how is it going to get used? And they always ask, am I going to be penalized for something? What happens if you video me and you find me doing something wrong? Am I getting in trouble for that? What's your answer to that? So having a thought process behind, what things are going to happen. And in particular, if you're going to start using AI for like hazard detection and putting in camera systems, guess what's going to happen in the first month of using that?
Okay, makes sense.
Your near misses and just like potential hazards, it's going to skyrocket because now all of a sudden you've got real-time detection happening 24/7 instead of, just the periodic safety person or, supervisor out there, conducting a safety walkthrough or something. Now you have a ton of data coming at you. So obviously in the beginning, your risk detection is going to rise and leadership needs to be prepared for this. It's not like oh my gosh, we need to freak out moment. It's like, oh my gosh, now we have a ton of data. What are we going to do with this? So having a plan for all the additional data that's going to come.
Which is going to help your employee buy-in, of course. They need to be involved in the process from the very
Yeah,
beginning. We always say that, but we don't always do that.
right. And, just around the security thing too, you should ask how your vendor, if you're going to use an AI vendor, how do they protect your data? What happens to that information if you decide you no longer work with them? Who owns that information? Are they using your data to train their models? And you want to hope that the answer is probably no. Um, how does your vendor source its information? How do their models stay up to date? do does your vendor, the team that's building this AI model, are they diverse? Do they have a lot of perspectives going into this so that you can eliminate some of the bias behind it? There's a lot of questions to ask, and we're just scratching the surface here in the podcast, but there's a lot of information that people need to consider before committing to an AI vendor.
Yeah, just the recent incident with the DNA information, 23. Uh, what are they going to do with all that data they've
Right.
accumulated now? And that should be
Uh-huh.
something to be afraid of. I think I cut you off a little too soon. You said another way to use the AI as a safety professional is to test out a work process before actually doing it.
Yeah, augmented reality. So there are just really incredible tools out there now where, I mentioned earlier, fail safe. Augmented reality is a great way to do that. So essentially, let's just call it like a virtual overlay of a work environment whereby you get to walk through a particular, maybe it's a high risk task, um, and make sure that you fully understand how to perform the task. And you can even create scenarios whereby something goes wrong. And so now the worker has to, in augmented reality, figure out, what do I do? How do I solve this problem in real time? And so augmented reality is just a really great way to test out a process before you physically have to go do it in person.
Kind of like a pilot being in a
Same
lab,
here.
basically, and being
Yeah,
faced with an emergency and what is their first move, that sort of thing. But I
yeah,
like the idea of using, robots and stuff to check out dangerous areas without sending someone in. I mean, that's a great
yep,
use of it.
yep.
So how do we remove the hype and find out what's really valuable and effective?
Well, since we figured out what our problem is in the beginning, we've defined what the problem is, and we created goals as part of just our exploration process. Next step is, determine if the AI tool that you're considering actually helps solve those problems. And if it does, is it scalable? Can you actually scale this AI system? And the one thing to consider here is, when we say scale, does that mean just to like 15 more safety people? Or does that mean to 5,000 employees? Because the next important question is, how does this vendor charge? Are they going to charge me per user? Or is it a license per site? So figuring out what this is ultimately going to cost you is part of this whole scalability thought process. Um, I say scrutinize the AI tool's capabilities and methodology. Ask that vendor, how they trained it, how did they keep it up to date, what type of quality testing do they do to make sure that it's functioning properly and it's giving you accurate responses. Do they perform penetration tests? And if they do, what are the results? Um, and then does this service provider keep their solution up to date with evolving risks? I mean, the global climate changes and we see new risks coming up every single year. Does the vendor have a way to make sure that its AI solution is up to date on these emerging risks?
Seems like it's going to be a constant input of data as things change.
And it should be.
And I think when you're talking about the employees, are you talking about like wearable technology? Is that a piece of all that we're describing here?
It could absolutely be. Generally, wearables are more of an IoT. So again, if you're using AI, AI loves data, and there's no better place to get it than, devices. So wearable technology feeds systems data, and the AI system uses that information to kind of build its risk profile and its predictions.
I think
Um,
that's where people feel like they're being scrutinized
Absolutely.
and things
Yep.
being turned in. So that has to be real clear from the start because
Yeah.
I'm interested in the wearable technology. I think it does help when people work alone to realize what risks they're taking or what risks are out there, not necessarily of their making. So
Absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of tech available now, even in the past decade for lone worker safety, which is really great to see.
that was one of the issues I had in one of my jobs is that we had people that would work at night to answer trouble calls for different issues and
Yeah,
how do we stay in touch with them if they're
yep,
underground or what have you. And our methods were crude, mostly a check-in system. And it makes it too late if something happens, unfortunately. But you had to do something. We just didn't have that kind of technology available.
right. And times change. So,
And they get better, I hope.
yeah, absolutely. Continuing on the thought of just like figuring out what's hype and what's legit. Um, One of the things with AI is, I mentioned the accuracy of responses. There's something that we call transparency. We, particularly me, and I would imagine other safety professionals, you want to know the rationale that the AI uses to make its decisions. So, will your vendor offer some sort of transparency so that you can understand how their AI model is making predictions, calculations, how it's sending alerts? So, what is the actual thought process that AI model goes through to give you an answer?
I
Um,
think I follow you. Could you like expand on that a little bit? How it reaches its decisions? That's what we're talking about. So what would be the criteria for that?
Well, so let's just give a simple example. Let's just say I asked the AI model, and I actually did do this. I did a noise sample for a client, and it was in an 8-hour shift. Well, the calculations were made for an 8-hour shift. I didn't have the software. It was run by a different company. But my client actually works a 10-hour shift. So I had to adjust the TWA for a 10-hour shift instead of an 8-hour shift. Well, I was testing out AI and I asked AI, I literally uploaded the PDF document of the noise sample and I said, please adjust this through calculation to change it from an 8-hour to a 10-hour shift. How does that change my dose and TWA? And it gave me an answer. And then I said, please show your reasoning. And it gave me all of the calculations and essentially the rationale that it used to come to that decision. That's what I'm talking about. You need to be
Okay.
able to see that because essentially, as a safety professional, that is the work that we would have had to do, in Excel or in a software database somewhere. If AI is going to give you that type of response, you want to know how it's getting to that, partially because you might have to show your own work. But second, like sometimes you do need to double check AI. We can't just solely rely on AI.
That
We
would be my
use
fear.
our brains too.
Sounds
Yes.
like the math teacher. Go ahead. You got the right answer. How did you get to it? Was it a wild guess? Or
100%. Yes.
okay, so that I'm glad you
Yes.
expanded on that. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
So, what would be your advice to employers looking into AI?
Um, Well, AI it's a big tool in your business toolbox. So, if you're not using it, my guess is you will be soon. But, studies in the AI index that's released by Stanford every year shows that about 78% of businesses are using it. So, in some capacity.
Okay.
So the reality is pretty much everybody's using it in some way. What you need to do as an organization is figure out which AI system is going to be best suited for you, and then launch a pilot. Um, I I am not a proponent of investing fully in a software system and launching large scale. You need to test small so that you can figure out where things are going to potentially go wrong and make sure that you and your vendor have a solution for that. So, you know, pilot, learn, then launch. Um, The other thing that I use, last year I took a AI applications course for business growth through Northwestern Kellogg. It was incredible. And one of the tools that I got from that was something called an AI canvas and a data intensity radar. These things were phenomenal tools in helping you kind of define the problems and the goals and then figure out where do I have a bunch of data from and what is the quality of that data. And essentially, you're looking at data intensity. Because then what you want to do is once you've identified those are like your arrows directing you to where would potentially be a really great place to start using AI. So use some sort of tool to help you define the problem, figure out what your goals are, um, basically frame what the first 3 months could look like and where you would start using AI before you actually launch.
What do you find from your experience is the most common use, like the first use or basic use that people have?
I think a lot of us are using it to help us simple things like drafting emails, analyze reports, um, training content, creating training content. There's software out there for inspections. So those would probably be the top four things I think that come to mind because they're pretty easy. A lot of us use Chat GPT to, you have some initial thoughts, you put it together, and then Chat GPT kind of helps you smooth it out. Um, so emails, reports, easy slam dunk for AI to help you with those things. Um, those safety inspections, why not let AI draft what a ladder inspection checklist should look like for you? And if you can upload a picture of your ladder and it starts to identify what could potentially be wrong, even better. Not all vendors do that, so you need to ask, what value can they provide me, and how is that going to help? I think kind of the next big wave of use cases for safety people will be around augmented reality and potentially avatars. I've just started using avatars a lot for communication and for training, and they're super easy to create. And essentially, when there's things like training content or information that needs to be conveyed, but you can't physically be there, Avatar is a real simple way to make that happen. Um, and then, we talked about the CCTV. I think that those are becoming, a lot more prevalent in workplaces to identify, hot spots within facilities for fork truck traffic and just high risk areas.
So prediction is pretty much what a safety person would want to start doing to
Yeah.
determine their patterns in that. So have you got any success stories for me?
Yeah, sure. I'll mention a local company here in town. I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and work with OVD Insurance, and they started using an AI platform to help them with their on-site risk inspections. So when they go on site to, a client or a policyholder, um, this software, they can drop pictures into the software and it identifies the hazards and the regulatory code citation. And it basically generates all the information that you need for a report. So for them, that kind of cut their inspection time in half and then their report writing time by 70%.
Wow.
So, you know, when you start thinking about the use of AI to help with things like that, it allows you to do some of the things that maybe would have a bigger impact. So if you're an insurance company, you want to add some other, highly valuable things to your policyholders, working on prevention rather than let's get down and, talk about your loss run for the past year. What if you could automate a lot of that? And now instead of sitting down to talk about your loss run, you're actually sitting down to talk about the implementation strategy for
Right.
some new program.
The solutions, coming up with solutions after you've got all this scut work done, basically.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of a silly question, but why do you think this is a topic that's important to talk about right now?
Well, I mean, AI is everywhere and data collection is happening everywhere all the time. And AI feeds on data. So the time in society is actually just it's perfect for the use of AI because we have so much data to feed an AI system, and AI works in seconds or potentially minutes instead of as humans minutes or hours or days. um, we're just it's the perfect time in history to start using AI to kind of streamline the work that we're doing. And really, as safety professionals, I see AI as, really giving us an opportunity to transform workplace safety. It can help us predict risks, can automate some of those hazard detections. It's literally the eyes and ears when we can't be there. It can help with corrective actions. And because it can analyze just massive data sets, particularly historical data, it can start to reveal hidden trends. And when we can have all of that fed to us in concise reports, patterns, graphics, it lets us, start to really focus on reducing injuries, and it frees
Exactly.
up our time so that we can focus on strategic prevention rather than just the daily firefighting.
With the caveat that sure that you're putting good information in because
Yeah.
you're only going to get out what you put in, right? It's got to
Yes.
be accurate and you
Yes.
better be on top of what the guardrails are. I liked your example of the bowling
Yeah.
alley guardrails. You do need
Yeah.
to keep track of the guardrails, which could change. So, any other final thoughts as we wrap this up?
No, I just encourage everybody to test. Even if you are potentially a naysayer of AI, the reality is it's not going anywhere. And in fact, it's just going to become even more and more prevalent in the workplace and in society as a whole. So it kind of behooves us to understand what it is and how it works and how we can use it. And the best way to do that is just to try. Um,
Grab the
just,
tiger by the tail.
yeah,
Just get
and
involved, jump into it. Yeah.
absolutely.
It's
And I
hard to trust boomers, though, you understand. To just jump into it. I don't have an IT department, so I have learned to, yeah, you can figure it out if you try.
But
So
that's the great thing about AI. It can literally tell you what to do and how to do it. Um, you don't need your IT department just to try it, and it's just it's so fun. I learn something new every single week with AI, and it's really helping me just as a consultant as well.
that's
With
awesome. That really sells it right there. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Our mission with the Michigan Safety Conference is to enhance workplace health and safety by sharing EHS best practices, provide education, and create a community of experts to help eliminate workplace injuries and fatalities. You know, in safety, we look for every advantage or technology that aids our mission in protecting workers. AI may offer some interesting concepts worth exploring as it's quickly becoming more common in everyday applications. I'd like to thank Heather Chapman from Paradigm Safety. She can be reached at heather@paradigm-safety.com. If you have questions about this podcast, the Michigan Safety Conference, if you'd like to be a guest or sponsor one of our podcasts, info can be found on our website, michsafetyconference.org. Thank you for listening to Safety Spectrum. This is Sheila Ide.